said made me think about this. We do have a society that tries to set up these binary relationships with people, and that really limits us. You know, truth be told, you know, I did my DNA test, so I'm like really like 6% Swiss German, so I got a little Swiss German in me, right? But society, hey, you can just be black, man. I'm the whitest one in my family. So if you look at my DNA, I'm the whitest one in my family. And if I tell my daughter she's the lightest one in my family, but I'm the whitest one. I have the most European DNA. But that part of me really isn't recognized. If you go back and look at my grandmother, you would think she was a white woman. That's who she was, but she was categorized as a black woman because someone else decided to put her in that category. And so even sometimes how we define ourselves, you know, what standards are we using? Are we locked into how the world views us, or is there a different message that we can convey as a church? Now, I'm not saying that we need to discount. We can't discount the role race plays here in this country. We just can't. But we can have a healthy understanding of these things as we move forward, as we do our work, as we think about our theology. I often hear from people from all sides, well, the Bible is clear. And yeah, the Bible is clear until you open your mouth and start talking about it. But that's like, the Bible is clear on this. You know, it is, I get it sometimes from my brothers and sisters from Nigeria. Then I get some from my brothers and sisters from Kansas. They all got real clear interpretation of the Bible. Okay. Yeah, the Bible is clear. So let's let the Holy Spirit guide us. But we have to really just, as we think about our work and what you're going to do in the conference and how this will shape and form you, this work, you know, what's culture, the way we do things versus, you know, what's Christ. That's an important thing we have to wrestle with. Is culture bad? No, you can have a culture. You can do things a certain way. You can have certain expectations. But be mindful of the goals that you want to set in your practices. We can have preferences. Some like to sing in 4-part harmony. I would like to sing in 4-part harmony if I could figure out my part. Like I took music, it just takes a little while. And I think this is what I think. I think most Mennonites don't really know their parts. They just grew up singing it. Like they couldn't pick it out if it was a new song. Do you agree with this? Do you think they actually just picked it apart? You know, I think folks, some people just know about it, just memorize it. You know, they're not really that great of a musician. I don't know. Because the pitch pipe, when you do the pitch pipe, it goes a little too fast. I need a little bit more time to figure out my part. But we can have preferences in how we sing, how we do music. But that doesn't mean that someone else's music is better or worse. That's where we run into problems. When we think our culture is the best one, or our culture connects us more to God, or our practices are more godly than another practice. So this person is bad because they operate a different way. Yes, we can have common cultures. We'll have to find new ways of doing things. And if we're going to be in this loving community, it's going to require commitment and sacrifice from all of us, not just one group. And not just the dominant culture, but from other people that are part of our community. All right, you all have seen the images already, so I can skip those. I don't know if that was fifth time I was like Jesus, but then good times. That would be funny if it was a different group. All right. So part of this work is just defining who we are. That's one of the work for you in Virginia Conference. Who are we? And begin with the end in mind when you're seeking to change the culture. Because this work means that, hey, I'm signing up to change the way we do things around here. God says to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. So God, I like this. My interpretation of this, I'm not a theologian. But God just says, I am. You know, I am what you need me to be. You know, it's hard to define it, but I am those things that you need in order to be rescued, in order to find the peace that you are seeking for. So we need to put our trust and faith in God as we do this work. The first thing we want to think about is just evaluate your current systems and your culture. That's what we're doing with the IDI, what we're evaluating kind of where we're starting from. You know, what is our level of cultural competency here in the organization? And so we'll be focusing on these five aspects. And you actually have people in all five of these categories. So the 9-12, no, you don't have anyone in the 9. The denier basically misses differences. They don't see what's going on. They can't shift perspectives. They can't see the important differences in culture. The next is polarization, judges differences. We do have a few people in polarization, a pretty good chunk of people in polarization. There are two different aspects of polarization. One of them is reversal, which basically means that you are lifting up another culture kind of at the detriment of your own. You're kind of, I like to say you're romanticizing other cultures. You're more critical of your own culture than you are of other cultures. I don't think that's helpful, especially as an African American in this church. I think it leads to tokenism. I think it leads to kind of a colonial mindset. When we think of things this way, we want to be intercultural. We want to value not only these other cultures, but we want to value our culture as well. I tell people it's okay to be white. You might not want to shout white power in a crowded room, but it's okay to be white. And really, I wouldn't even say be white. You know, especially in the Mennonite community. You know, we're aware of our Swiss German, Russian German heritage. Those are the ways that we describe ourselves before we just started categorizing people as pretty much black and white, limiting the other rich aspects of our cultural heritage. Minimalization, many organizations will start minimalization. That's kind of the colorblind, can't we all get along mindset. We really don't, we try to focus on commonalities. That's always a good starting point, focusing on the common culture. It doesn't necessarily value differences as much, but it's, okay, how do we come together? What are connection points? And that's where the majority of people will be in most schools that I work with. And then acceptance, deeply comprehend differences, so you appreciate the differences, the cultural differences, and then in adaptation, you'll be able to leverage those differences in very effective ways. And you have a pretty good number of people in this area, and you have, I think, one person in adaptation. But it takes a lot of work to get there. It takes a lot of work. So we'll talk about that later. The other thing, some of the things you want to clarify your vision as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion, welcoming versus affirming. These are things that I think we need to think about, think through. Diversity is kind of more of this welcoming, like we welcome people in. Affirming moves more toward inclusion, where we're valuing your gifts, we're acknowledging your gifts, we appreciate your different leadership styles as you become part of the community. And I'm not saying this, I know those are kind of buzzwords in regards to LGBT inclusion, but I'm using those more broadly, not just for that one identity factor. Clarify values and expected behaviors, tradition versus good hermeneutics. So I like Fiddler on the Roof. If I really had time, I would write a theological dissertation on Fiddler on the Roof. I think it's just so profound and powerful, the message there. You know, what keeps the fiddlers on the roof? Is it tradition? Tradition. That's why they can stay on the roof. So tradition is important. I never want to discount culture. I know some people in the denomination said, well, you know, Glen, your staff, there's too many non-ethnic Mennonites in my staff. I said, I'm the biggest advocate for Mennonite culture that there is. You know, I love me some Brunswick stew and some beer rocks and all those things. What's those pepper things? Pepper nuts. I don't like them, but but there are so many aspects of this culture that I appreciate. You know, I go to people's houses, see people that have like a little jar, mason jars with nuts and stuff in there. I came home to them like, hey, we get us the mason jars and put some stuff in it. So there are many cultural things that I appreciate about the Mennonite community, but I also appreciate the theology, right? The theology, the things that aren't cultural, the Anabaptist theology is what has made me stay. So we can have culture, we can have practices, we can have things that we prefer, but we just need to clarify, you know, what are the expectations of people join this group? What does it mean if they have different styles, if they sing differently? I remember early on in Virginia conference at C3, we would have hymn singing every year. The Ward District would have a hymn singing. And the question we always got was, well, why do y'all keep saying the same thing over and over again? We used So we have different ways in which we connect with God, which we understand. Neither one is better than the other. Some of it is just tradition, how we were formed. Who do we want to be? You got to align your practices with that desired direction. That's really important. Figure out who you want to be and live into that. We have to meet people where they are. Again, there are many different aspects of diversity and inclusion. People will come to us broken, maybe have been abused on drugs, they've been silenced, and so part of that peace work is recognizing that, dealing with past hurts and harm that have been done to people. And you just have to be mindful that again, that's another layer of this work as people come to us with their bodies and the frameworks that they have and how they can roll. And then, we're not going to do that. Y'all seen this before. I did this for another group. All right. All right, and so as we think about this work again, we want to do this work and apply common sense to our efforts, but leading for success. It's about balance, telling the truth. Truth telling is important. Understanding where we have done harm, understanding where we've done good. You know, we want to tell the truth about both of those things as we go about this work. Understanding our history is important. The history of this conference, and there are some really good things about the Virginia Conference. There are some things where we can learn and grow from. And all those things are part of who you are. I've never shied away from telling my story. Being in the military and then becoming a part of this conference, working with Joe on the alternatives to military service. Joe, you probably never thought I would have been up here as an executive director of the Church, couldn't say so. So, working with different people, those histories are a part of us. My history helps me appreciate who I am as a part of this church now. So your history, the good and the bad, needs to be a part of that story as you work toward bringing justice to your system. All right, that's all we have right now. We're going to take a break. So we're going to take about a 15-minute break and I'm going to give some instructions. Then we'll come back to we're going to try to get started, so y'all can try to make your way to your seats. So we're going to finish up here.
if you would prefer to do in person, please make a note. My assumption was that I would do most of them on Zoom, but I'm happy to do in person. In fact, I would prefer that if it's at all possible and you're comfortable with it. We can meet, Clyde said we can meet at the office here in Harrisburg.
Are you local?
I am. I live in Dayton.
So we'll make the conference office available if you want to meet her there, and that would be a great way of being in person if you would like to. The conference room is big enough. The conference room is big enough that you would also be safe in that room because it seats up to 8 people, and we usually be there with her.
All right, we'll get started with the IDI portion. Just a couple of things, resources again available. Cesar Garcia from Midnight World Conference has What is God's Kingdom and What Does Citizenship Look Like? There might be a resource that you all want to use. And again, we have a lot of questions about, how do we do diversity if we don't have like a certain type of diversity. Again, I am going to plug this book that I wrote it during COVID. I think it does address a lot of those things. It has questions, activities in here. I consider myself a practitioner, and so I wanted to write a book that's practical, that you can take it, you can write it, you can go through those questions. It will help you develop a system. It has some resources in the back. But strategic partnerships is one of the sections where I talk about, churches. If you don't have everything, I don't believe the church has to have every single thing. You can create partnerships, you can create relationships, you can engage your community in different ways to explore some of these other aspects of diversity if you don't have everything in your congregation. You don't have to set up your own kingdom. You can be a part of the kingdom, part of that system.
What's the name of your book, Glenn?
It's Reawakening. And you can either go on Amazon or go on Harold Press. Both of these books are at Harold Press. Mine is on Amazon and Harold Press. So it has actually questions, activities that you can go through to spur some conversation. Okay, so we're going to review the IDI. We'll talk about some goals and challenges for you. And we'll look at the key results from the IDI for you all and talk about key recommendations, next steps as you all go through your process. So why the IDI? Why are we utilizing this tool? And this is the tool the Mennonite Church USA has utilized and is really endorsing. I was a part of the earlier work with Damascus Road, which was anti-racism training. Daniel Harshman and I worked on that. Regina Johnson Schools and what's the guy's name? Tobin. I know I'm getting ready to call him his old man. Tobin. They created that, adapted some of the things from Damascus Road. But some people felt like Damascus Road just kind of left you in a certain place. Like it was basically, hey, this is the analysis, you're racist, what's next? I think the IDI is a part of this work. You might need to do something else with the Roots of Justice. Following this, the IDI is just the first step. It's more broad than anti-racism training, but I think these skills are translatable across a number of aspects of dealing with this work. And so, part of the thing we want to think about is our team, how our team's most effective. We can have multicultural teams that aren't functioning well. That's one of the things that we want to understand. Cultural differences can be an obstacle when you just focus on diversity. And I think the church has done a good job at diversity, but maybe not so well on inclusion, which is the sharing of power, giving of power, changing how we operate. A monocultural team will actually outperform a poorly designed diverse team. That's what you have to think about. So a well-functioning monocultural team will outperform a poorly designed multicultural team. But we want to get to this place where leaders acknowledge and support cultural differences. This cultural differences become seen as assets to performance. And that's all of us, really. And I want you all to hear this. This is Glen's philosophy. Now, other people may have a different philosophy. We want to appreciate all of our differences. Like I said, there are so many cultural things I appreciate about parts of the church don't operate like Virginia Conference, but I can't run Mennonite Church USA like Virginia Conference. But I do appreciate the differences that the other conference leaders bring, the diversity that makes up this church, whether you're conservative or progressive. To me, you're all part of Mennonite Church USA. And so how do we work most effectively? The conservatives, to me, are like that, fit all the rules. They bring a certain aspect to the denomination that we need, a history, a perspective, stability. The progressives bring some attention that we need. Hey, you need to think about things in new and different ways. Hey, we may need to change. We need to shift in these aspects. It takes all of us to be a part of this church. I wish we could come to that understanding. We need progressives, we need conservatives, we need activists, we need all those things to have a healthy, thriving church. So that I have to see where we are. Understanding culture is the foundation, the starting point of all intercultural efforts. It is the most difficult concept to find widespread agreement on, but yet it is central to everything. And I would challenge us to say that even our individual congregations have some form of diversity, whether it's diversity of thought, age, gender. We have some form of diversity, some intersection of culture, even in our smaller contexts. And so there are a couple of things that we can pay attention to: the objective culture or the subjective culture. Objective culture, you see the artifacts and institutions created by a group of people, art, architecture, literature, games, holidays, those tangible things. And then there's the subjective culture. And the IDI measures the degree of subjective intercultural competence. So the things that kind of make us tick, that our perceptions, how we view, see the world, some of our important rituals, all of those things are kind of what we measure when we think about the IDI. We don't want to just focus on the surface level things. Celebrating Cinco de Mayo doesn't mean that you're inclusive of the Latino culture or the Mexican culture in particular. Understanding how people, marry, how people celebrate life, how they bury their dead. Those are the subjective type of rituals, and that's what the IDI addresses. Again, we kind of see this, you probably see this iceberg thing before. We don't want to just focus on here. This is where we often have our attention, is up here. But we want to start thinking about these things: social expectations, behaviors, values, roles, perceptions, beliefs. All these are part of what we need to think about. If we're going to be anti-racist, if we're going to be intercultural. These belief systems, that scares some people. We're all Anabaptists, right? We're all Anabaptists, we're Anabaptist Mennonites, but we can still have some variety of how that's articulated. And I think it's okay. I mean, we don't want to have people that don't believe in God as a part of the church, per se. Now, let me clarify what I mean by that. I had someone that applied to work for Mennonite Church USA, and one of the questions asked about their belief in Jesus. They didn't think Jesus was God, basically. They thought Jesus was just a nice guy. I was like, well, you can't work for Mennonite Church USA. That's not what we believe. Jesus is the Son of God. That's who we believe Jesus was. He wasn't just an ordinary man walking around. If you don't have that fundamental belief, you can't be part of our staff, even though you may believe in these other aspects of peace and justice. That's not what we're about. So you can have core beliefs and core things, even though they may be expressed in different ways. Subjective culture, objective, we won't do this joke. We'll leave that alone. All right. We'll go context. Actually, I want to tell a story about this, about tea. So, so this is the Ice Cube. So that's like the arts custom music. So Ice Cube, he's a rapper. He makes movies now. Christian, you know that? All right. Tea. But I went to South Africa. And everywhere we would go on a mission trip when I was youth pastor before Christian went out back in the day. I was youth pastor, and everywhere we would go in South Africa, they would give us tea. And so I was like, man, I like tea, but I don't drink that much tea, right? Especially I was in Texas, so I drink iced tea. And so we would keep going over the houses, they would say, hey, would you like some tea? I was like, no, thank you. And then like 5 minutes later, they would bring some tea. were pouring tea out the window, and we were just sitting. I had had enough tea. They didn't have some Glen tea. That's my favorite tea, not Glen tea. They had some Glen tea. That's why I don't want any Glen tea. And so I asked my sponsor family that I was staying with us. I said, hey, what's going on with this tea? We keep telling folks we don't want tea, and they keep bringing it. They said, well, what are you saying? I said, well, no, we don't want it. He said, oh, they think you're just being polite. You have to say, I will just have some later. Then they'll know that you don't want the tea. So that's a different cultural practice that I had to get used to. I was like, we had this whole miscommunication thing going on. They thought I was being polite, and I thought they were getting rude. Because I wasn't aware of some of those different cultural practices, some of those expectations. All right. So Luke 9, 1 through 6. And he said to them, take nothing for the journey, neither staffs, nor bag, nor bread, nor money, and do not have 2 tunics apiece. Whatever house you enter, stay there, and from there depart. And whoever will not receive you, when you go out to that city, shake off the very dust from your feet as a testimony against them. So they departed and went through towns preaching the gospel and healing everywhere. I like this story of the disciples being sent out and how they immersed themselves in the culture. God was basically their protection. They didn't take things with them. They had to get out of their comfort zone in order to engage the various communities that they wanted to share the gospel with. I think that's a mindset that we need to have. We want to learn, we want to grow, we want to become a part of the cultures and the communities that we want to serve. If we take everything that's near and dear to us with us on this journey, we won't have room for the Holy Spirit to work and for those connections to be made and as we minister the gospel. So one of the things we have to think about as we begin to set the table here for this work, it is not enough to be a good host. Let people make your congregation home, let it become their congregation. Practice cultural competence. What does home look like? When we are inviting people into our space, when we're going to other spaces, when we are coming together as a conference, do people feel like they are at home? How are we welcoming those diverse gifts, those diverse perspectives? How are we including them in the process? Again, I have very fond memories of going to Williamsburg Christian Retreat Center and being a part of what was going on there, setting up I think we set up a snack shop because we were going on a mission trip to Jamaica or something like that at one time. But to be a part of the baseball game, to be a part of the culture, to be able to bring some aspects of who I was to those settings was very important. So how do we start creating those environments where people feel at home, where they feel like they're not guests, but they are a part of the family? That's part of this work. Think about what it's all look like. All right, so again, we are focusing on intercultural competence. Part of that is the diversity and inclusion. So diversity is the who, the mix of differences. Focus on the impact of differences. Diversity is measured by demographic analysis, so you can see diversity. You can check boxes off. That's one part of this work. What type of diversity are you looking for? Who are you looking for? Who will be impacted by this work? Inclusion is the what? The mix, feeling valued, engaged, focus on the experience, measured by outcomes. Measured by outcomes. So that's going to be tangible results that we're looking for. All right, so how are we going to measure the outcome? How are we going to know that we're being successful in our inclusion efforts? And it's not just about who's showing up, but how are they engaging? How are they a part of what's going on? And then intercultural competence is the how. How do we make these things work? Focus on capacity. The IBI measures this. So what are your systems that you're going to have in place? What are the tools that you're going to use to make these things happen, to make diversity, equity, and inclusion happen? Are you able to make the shifts? Can your systems change to reflect your diversity, equity, and inclusion goals? And it's hard for us to do in the church, right? We don't like measuring stuff. We just like to trust Jesus. But we need to measure some stuff. We need to have some tangible things. We need to write some things down. We need to have some outcomes that people can see. We need to, and I'll say this later, we need to define what the end is for people to can't just be about feeling good. We have to have systems in place. We have to define how this is going to work. Cultural self-understanding is important. So again, knowing who we are and a cultural understanding of others. So the IDI will help us to have a better sense of who we are. And the capacity to shift perspective and behavior based on commonalities and differences by experiencing cultures and individuals with greater levels of complexity. We want to get below that surface level. You saw the kind of the top level on an iceberg. We want to start getting below the surface, change how we do things, change what binds us to the assumptions that we make. And those things will translate into our policies and procedures, leading to more equitable outcomes. And we have to have a sense of who we are. That's why I had to do the identity thing at the very beginning. We have to have a sense of who we are and able to effectively connect with other people. You've seen that, so I'll skip that. This is the spectrum that we'll be using, the progression we'll use. Greater intercultural competence predicts increased knowledge, interest of other cultures, less intercultural anxiety. That's always a good thing. We need less anxiety in the church, right? More intercultural friendships, so those relationships. Even though we are focusing on, we need to think about systems. This is I think, where we get in trouble sometimes with the church. Is actually, I would say these two areas. And I'll say, let's start off with friendships. We think having good relationships is enough. It's not. You have to have good systems. You can't just have good systems, though, without having good relationships. They all tie into each other. So you need some tangible outcomes. You need to write some things down. You need to have policies and procedures that reflect the level of diversity and inclusion that you want. But you also need to start building some good relationships. So it's connecting with people, talking to people, being curious about people. All those things are very important. And then even having a higher study of broad satisfaction. I think we do a decent job in the church with that now. You know, in the past, some of our cross-cultural experiences have been kind of more colonial model, where we're imposing our culture on other people. I don't find that as a huge problem in the Mennonite Church. I think we actually do a pretty good job. I think we adapted a while ago, whereas some other faith traditions maybe kept that model. I think what I've seen, we've done a pretty good job. Where the problem does happen is people that don't have a good sense of themselves. Sometimes missionary kids who were formed as minorities in a cross-cultural context, and they come to the United States, and then they're the majority, they don't relate very well because they don't know how to navigate those differences. They're in that polarization where they're more critical of their own race, their own identity. They don't really know where they fit because they didn't really have a good, I would say, experience when they were the minorities. Some people were picked on in these settings. Some of them were isolated in these cross-cultural settings. They weren't really engaging in the culture. They were just there. They didn't have a good experience. So it shows up on the IDI for a lot of people. All right, we'll skip this section. So understand the IDI report. So you should all have the group report on the table. That's the composite report for Virginia Conference. People always ask, is this valid? Especially people that are lower down in perspective. This is not a test, okay? It's not a test. It's an assessment. It just gives a snapshot of where you are on the journey. I find this to be very, again, accurate unless there was something going on in your life when you were taking this assessment. So if you answered honestly, you should get a good result. Unless you were going through some type of trauma, if you had a significant life change, you were recently abused by someone from another culture, then your results could be skewed. But if you were just going wrong as normal and answered honestly, the assessment should be pretty accurate for where you are. And so you have I'll put this handout on your table so you can see that and just read a description of the different levels of where you could be on the IDI. All right, so denial, we don't have anyone in denial. Polarization. In many of these profiles have two sides to it. So polarization has two sides. One where you're critical of people from a different identity, a different background, and one where you're overly critical of your own. Everyone in here that's in polarization has that reversal. So you're more critical of your own identity, your own culture than you are of others. Again, I don't really think that's helpful because I think it leads to unhealthy relationships, situations where we're trying to take care of people of other cultures and not letting them be themselves. You know, it's kind of like almost like, you know, like you're a pet or something, a pet project, and it doesn't really recognize the power dynamics in a healthy way. We have minimalization, where most people will fall into that category. Again, it has two aspects of it. You have the dominant culture when you're in minimalization, where it's kind of like, hey, you're going to be a part of this community. Let's focus on the commonalities. How can we bring you along? How can we bring you up to speed with what's going on in this dominant culture? And then you have the flip side, the people that are in the minority, where as a survival technique, you're going to put your mask on. I'm going to wear my mask because I want to fit in. I don't want to be seen as different. I don't want to make any waves. I want to fit into the culture. I want to be a team player. So two different aspects of that. Then we have acceptance and adaptation, and we do have a few people in those areas. All right, so the IDI will have a couple different aspects, and when you get your individual one, you'll be able to go over this. There's your perceived orientation where you think you are, and then there's your developmental orientation where the assessment says you are. So we all overestimate how well we're going to do, you know, how we think about ourselves. And so then we have the gap. What's the gap between that? You don't want a huge gap. You want to have a good perception of who you are, understanding where you are in this perspective. So the bigger the gap, probably the more challenging it will be for you to work through some of these things. But you can close that gap. It'll just say, hey, you need to be more aware of where you are and your viewpoints. All right, so here we are, the results, what you all have been waiting for, the results for Virginia Conference. So, as a whole, we thought we were here, right? Acceptance. Everyone wants to be in acceptance, that high level of understanding, cultural understanding. But where we actually fell was right in the middle, in minimalization, right smack dab in the middle of minimalization. So, Glen, is that good or bad? It is what it is, and I think that's a normal starting place for many organizations. It's a normal starting place. I think it's, I would say it's a healthy place to be in if you haven't started on this work. Of course, we all want to score really well and score really high on things, but this is a snapshot of where you are. It just will create a baseline of the work that you need to do. And the good thing about it is if you're in minimalization, you are able to recognize some of these differences. You just now need some tools, some policies, and procedures to help you learn how to be effective in dealing with the university that you're going to work for. All right, so let's think about our orientation gap.
Glenn, what was how many surveys were collected for this?
I had 42. 42, yeah. All right, so here's where you were. So 124, where you thought you were at 100 is the actual. So minimalization. What do we want to think about? You turn to your page, I think it's page 9. Yeah, page 9. So minimalization, what does that orientation mean? Maybe used as a coping strategy by non-dominant culture members. So, you know, people want to fit in, they'll put that mask on in order to survive. So sometimes we think that people are silent or aren't complaining, that everything is going well, that, you know, that we made it. No, not necessarily. People may just be trying to fit in. And you have to be appreciative of power differences when you're surveying, when you're interviewing people. You can miss that in minimalization. Sometimes I work with, and I'll use this is not always the case, but first generation immigrants, particularly maybe of Asian descent, you know, genuinely, I have to be careful how I address those groups. Because I'm in a perceived position of power in the church. And so if I ask a question, most times I'm going to get a brief, even if they don't agree. And so as someone that's trying to practice cultural competency, I realize for that group of people, I need to ask questions in a different way to get authentic answers from them. There are certain things about the Native American culture as far as how power is utilized, how leaders are valued. And so if you're working with a group like that, you have to be aware of power dynamics. Now, if I'm with a group of white Mennonites, they don't care anything about my title, right? They don't care if you're executive director of the Mennonite Church USA or anything else. It doesn't really mean a lot to that in general. So we have to be mindful of those things when we are interacting. If we're just expecting everyone to think and see the world as we do, we can miss those vital differences, and we're not getting the information that we need. This plays out a lot of times when people do surveys. Hey, well, we asked that group of people if they were bothered by this. They said no. Well, yeah, they said no because you're a person in power. You have authority. You have resources that you're going to allocate to them. That's why they don't think it's a problem, because they're not going to say anything. They're either afraid to because they don't want their lifeline cut off, or they're being respectful of your power and your position. So you have to be mindful of those things. And I still work on that too. When I deal with other women leaders, I try to be mindful of the space that I occupy. Now, I don't take myself that seriously, but after working with a number of women coworkers, I hear how after maybe they'll say something like, "Well, you see, they didn't listen to me. When you said it, it just went on through. They were agreeing, but when I said it, nobody said anything." So those are things that I have to pay attention to when I'm in different cultural settings. All right, so you can read those things. Seeks to avoid stereotyping and biased behavior by treating each person as an individual. That's good. That we look at people as individuals. But we also have to understand that another aspect of that is the impact of race and identity, the role it plays in our society, right? We do want to value people as individuals, but then collectively, there are some narratives that go along with me being a black person or someone being Mexican, American. There are some narratives that go along with that. So we can't just dismiss them, but we can also value individuals. May not be fully aware of how one's ideas and behavior are culturally grounded, tends to assume other people from other cultures are basically like us, and applies their own cultural views to other cultures. I don't know why I can't talk that. To other cultures in a way that minimizes the importance of cultural differences. I don't know, how many of y'all have ever been to Texas? A few of y'all. Like, I lived in Virginia for 17 years. I grew up in Texas, was away for 17 years, and after I went to college, moved here. Then I moved back to Texas in 2010. And I was like, wow, when I got back to Texas. I was like, Texas, really Texas? There's no other place that you go where, like, everybody has a flag of the state on their house, a bumper sticker of the state. There are just certain expectations that come along with being a Texan. And so you can get caught up in your little world or your little bubble and not be aware of how different other cultures see and interpret the world. I mean, there's a distinct difference from Virginia and Texas. You think, hey, y'all in the U.S., man, you've been to Texas. It's different. So those things we just have to be aware of when we are kind of in our isolated communities, our isolated bubbles. Just check this out. All right, so again, the minimization orientation, you can read that for yourself, but that's where we are in the majority of this group. All right, so a couple things I want you all to pay attention to is your results. And so why does this matter? So you have 33% of the people, I think you have one person at adaptation, 33% of the people in acceptance, the majority of votes over half are in minimization. So again, that's a good starting place. And then you have 11% in polarization. And so one thing I will point out is that this group will need a little bit of a different strategy, right? They're at a different starting point as far as their ability to receive this training and to move forward in this work. And when you all look at your individual profiles, I think Jay will be able to help you with that to kind of let you know the work that you need to do. That you may be at a different starting point. You may be a little resistant to even some of the training that we're doing today. It's still us versus them mindset. You haven't been able to fully shift the switch. There's, I would say, still some barriers up there. But again, it's from a more of a reversible standpoint. It's not saying that you're racist, you don't like people from other cultures. That's not what this is saying. It's just saying that your ability to shift may be a little bit more limited than some of the other groups. These people here, if you're in this group, you may have to slow down a little bit. You may have to let people get up to speed to catch up a little bit. You may be a little further ahead. So be mindful of that once you have your individual profile. If you are in adaptation or acceptance, even though you are culturally competent, sometimes we can lose sight of the fact that other people can't see the world and engage the world the way we do. That's just something we have to remind ourselves. Even though I'm black, I understand that I'm also in a different social economic status than the majority of black people in the United States. So my experience as a black man is different from a black man that's lower educated in a lower socioeconomic status. Those are things that we have to be mindful of. Even though we are in some of these categories, we are still parts of other categories. So as we think about intersectionality, how these things fit together, it can be complex. So if you ask Glenn, like, hey, Glenn, what black people think? Well, I can tell you what black folks like me think. Now, I do a better job than my kids, right? Because my kids have grown up in relative affluence, right? I grew up in some of the poor neighborhoods in Houston. My kids didn't. They grew up going to private school and all the other things, so they don't have kids. You know, my daughter, she's real poor black. Like, you don't have kids. So even if we're part of these communities, we have to be mindful of our own bias, our own cultural understandings, and so we all have to shift, even if we're in these other categories. Just be mindful that other people may have to kind of catch up. All right, so this is kind of where we are. Those numbers I thought would be helpful to see. 8 people in polarization of the folks that took the assessment. A couple people did. 24 people in minimization. Again, that's very normal. This is actually I think it's a pretty high number of people be in. High number of people did acceptance 9. Adaptation 1. Nobody denied it, which is good. I think that's good. All right. Again, the polarization, reversal, judgmental orientation that views cultural differences in terms of us versus them. And so you're here at number 2, an overly critical orientation towards one's own cultural values and practices, and an uncritical view toward other cultural values and practices of other people. That's the key right there. You can be critical. Everything from other cultures doesn't need to be romanticized. And everything about your culture isn't bad. I hear it a lot sometimes in the church when folks, I don't know if I want to say demonize, white man. That's not the objective. It's not to demonize white man. It's to find balance. It's to create more opportunities for people. So you can be proud of your male. I'm glad I'm a guy. I've never been a woman, but I'm glad I'm a guy. I appreciate that. I just need to know how to utilize the power and privilege that I have to help other people, to walk alongside other people. How do you do that? How do you use who you are to benefit other people, especially as we think about being ministers of the gospel, of working in churches. And then there's some aspects of the culture that aren't healthy. There's some maybe some say soul food. I'll just use that as an example. Soul food. I like some soul food, but bacon and pork and all that stuff is not the healthiest thing in the world, right? So even though that's a cultural thing, we don't have to practice it. We can find ways to do that better. There are many African Americans now that are cooking soul food, in more healthy ways. They're not using pork, they're not using products. They're doing it in vegan ways, things like that. When I went to Ghana, in Ghana, when you go to Ghana, anytime you go anywhere, go to a village or whatever, they'll give you a glass of water. That's a cultural practice. Now, someone in polarization is saying, well, I'm a guest here in this country, and they gave me this water, and I'm going to drink it because I want to fit into the culture. And then they drink water and they get sick. Or worse, right? So what would I do when I went to Ghana and they gave me water? I would take the glass of water they would give me. I would acknowledge the person. I would take it and put my mouth to my thumb and hand them the water back. And so I appreciated that culture and I did that. And so we can do things in a way that honors people, values people, but hold on to who we are and do things in a way that's beneficial to us. That's kind of an extreme example. Singing music in different ways, I think we do that. So you may want to shift it, participate in some of those other cultural practices. Partaking in other rituals is not going to cost you your life. But there are ways that we can interact with people, be respectful, to value the things that are important to them, but still maintain a sense of our own identity. So it's not about stripping us of who we are, it's how do we work together. It's that intercultural versus, when we say multicultural, I think the word is parallel to that. And we want to intercultural, we want to begin to merge some of these things in our behavior. All right, so talk a little bit about range. A narrow range suggests that the group has a more consistent perspective when they're confronted with differences. When this narrow range exists within acceptance or adaptation, the group would more likely demonstrate relatively consistent perceptions and behavior that are generally adaptive around cultural differences. So the narrow of the range would mean that we're a little bit more consistent of how we see these things and what our approach would be. So where this is our span, it's like 53 points. That's a pretty large span. So this is the group of people that are in polarization. That's the group that's in minimalization. Then you have your acceptance and adaptation. That's a pretty broad range. So that means that you have a wide variety of practices and perspectives here in the conference. What does that mean? It just means that your work is going to be a little bit more challenging. Again, it's the diversity that we face at the national level. You're facing that here at the conference level, and you're probably having those same challenges at the congregational level. It's just a reality. And so as you think about the training and what you need to do, it's going to have to be differentiated. It's not going to be one size fits all. So hopefully you hear that. Those of you that are educators, that was one of the philosophies that was built in my head. You have to meet students where they are. So differentiated education, it can't be the same for everyone. You're going to have different tools and techniques for people that are in different places on this journey. So think about that. You have to have a multi-faceted approach. And get these people involved and help them. All right, so one of the things I like to do with groups when you are having assessment, well, how are you doing relative to the average? How are you doing compared to everyone else? And so this is where you are. Faith and Life Commission is a little bit better. I mean, it's really close. A little bit better than the average. Racial Justice Task Force, of course, you just eat on up there it's like an Olympic race right here, right? That's about 10. And our Virginia Conference Council was a little further down than the average, by a couple of points. Is that surprising? I don't know, probably not. Virginia Conference Council probably would be older, maybe more traditional. So that's would be reasonable. All right, and so this number right here is just the number of people, or the percentage of the people that are in polarization. And I would pay attention to that too. So you have more polarization in Virginia Conference Council than you have in any other groups, a significant more number of people. So that's something I would pay attention to, and maybe that's something you can work through when you're giving feedback to the individual groups, what you need to do if you're in that perspectives, a limited ability to shift those perspectives. It's still a us versus them mentality. You're going to have to work through that. It's us and us. All right. So what I want you to do now, we're going to pass out your individual. I think we're going to want you to move to your individual groups. And these are the individual reports, so you can see those, the individual categories that I showed you before. So you'll be able to look at that. Yeah. So you can kind of move the tables with people that fall into those categories. Okay. So all Virginia Conference Council, even other Virginia Conference Council people, racial justice task force people. The one group is pretty big, so you'll be able to cover some tables. The Faith and Life Commission